The topic I'm exploring today is what happens when lesson study is incorporated into the clinical field experience of pre-interns at a professional development school. And as I went through this data the first time, I thought about that the first lesson lacked precision. The focus oscillated between asking students, and so I put students on my puzzle piece here. So one of the things that came out of the first lesson was them understanding that they needed to focus the lesson. And that was one piece of their puzzle. That was why I decided on the puzzle analogy. So I decided to engage, to interact with my environment, to engage in a puzzle. And so I engaged in this puzzle because I noticed initially that all these different pieces, that each observation and each reflection from my pre-interns brought a different piece of this puzzle that formed the learning as a whole. Just biking alone.
On the brick, and I'm about to do a handstand and put my back up against the wall, upside down.
I am getting ready to perform data analysis while walking my dog. I'm realizing as I look at my list of things that came out of my brainstorming session this morning that some of them are resolutions to dilemmas that I had in my self-study of my teaching practice. They're not exactly dilemmas themselves. So part of what I'm processing this morning is trying to discern what is a dilemma and what is a resolution to a dilemma. So if I reduce my authority while maintaining a facilitative presence in the classroom, is that a dilemma? How do I reduce my authority? Or is that actually a resolution to another problem, which is how do I get students to share their ideas in a critical dialogue? How do I say it? How do I get my students to share their ideas while ensuring that inaccurate information gets corrected without being the one to always correct them? So how do I get them to correct each other? How do I do this? Maybe this isn't a resolution. Maybe this actually is a dilemma. How do I reduce my authority while maintaining a facilitative presence in the classroom? How do I do that? I don't know. Cooper, how do I do that?
Taking my data and I'm doing a frame. My data is talking about framework issues, so the thing that comes to my mind is kind of framing my data, giving myself a closer look at a little piece of it instead of the full paragraph. And I end up seeing information about more explanation and like the theory doesn't work with just this little bit, and so now all I'm seeing is really talking about the author not having grasped the theory and being quite poor, more explanation, and it makes me realize that I need to open to more frameworks and visualize more of my data, and therefore I interact with the data and I can see the full data now and see more of what's important, and also see the focus of bringing the framework to life. This frame contains the data that and this data is living, and I can understand.
Analyzing data is that you have piles of interviews like I you have a phenomenological study, you have pages of notes, you have multiple interviews from multiple time periods, and you think you know what that person looks like or what they are as in relation to your research and the questions that you're asking, which means if it was a house, it would look like this. This fancy house with the nice purple roof, the doors, all of the well-made material that you could live in. But what you don't understand is when you look further in your research, it actually looks like this. This loose, terrible pile of blocks that is only half filled, and you're projecting that it looks like a house when really it's just a pile of blocks. To make an even bigger point, or more exact point, not only does this house not look like these blocks, but this house is only a facade. When you turn the house around, you realize there's much more to it, including a detailed bath, pictures of a family, a bed, and a bathroom, to use this dollhouse example. Similarly, when you read over the notes, you have to get past the idea of what you think these different narratives are about and be ready to discover what they actually are, even if they don't fit into a nice, neat package and are more likely to resemble this lousy pile of blocks you made. There's still a certain truth in accepting it for what it is and describing it as what it has become, not what you're trying to force it to be.
I'm going to be interpreting some data that I gathered as part of a study I'm doing with inmates of a prison work farm. So building on the idea of a shared experience and also some of the common themes that come up, one of the themes that comes up in the interview and the data is this idea of patience, but also this idea of sort of being trapped in an area where you're forced to reflect on your thoughts. And so that's an experience I wanted to replicate with my interpretation and interaction with the data. So what I'm going to do is build myself a prison of sorts where I'm surrounded by the data and I'm able to reflect on it and let it sort of permeate all that's going on in my mind. So what I'm going to do is create a context similar to the context that might occur for the inmate himself, where he's constantly forced to think about his own experiences and his own existence. So first thing I'm going to do is just put the interview on loop, get the data going. I'm also going to photocopy what I have and make sure that I have plenty of copies of it. And then as that's happening, I'm going to build myself a prison of sorts, somewhere where I'm forced to stay and I'm restricted to just reflection. There's nothing else for me to do. Similar to the experience of someone who might be in the program themselves. It's so that I'm confined. It's this confined space, and there's nothing for me to do but think about how I'm going to interpret my data and the thoughts that I have about my own personal data. Going into my prison here, and I'm going to replay over and over in my head what's been said.
So far, this is my interaction with my data. Right now, I think that I'm just going to read some more and try to be inspired and something creative to do with it. But right now, I feel kind of trapped in a box. Nala, how much do you love the data? Go get it. Uh-oh. I think I may have lost my data. So, after a bit of a struggle, I got my data back. It's in okay shape. It's a little damp, but I think that I can work with it now.
I think that patient's somewhere down this hall.
room 119A. Name is Merker. Yep, I think this is it. Okay. All right, well, I'm going to go in there and see if I can connect with her. Okay, well, I guess I'll just come in. All right. Hi, my name's Jean. My name is Svanka.